My name is Aria Whitlow, 29 years old. Weddings are designed to make you believe in beginnings. Elizabeth's was almost aggressive about it, light like a prayer, a string quartet sawing at the tender places, peonies arranged like clouds that decided to sit still. My sister moved through the day with that choreographed grace she practiced her whole life, in a gown that looked more like a verdict than a dress. Brian cried when he saw her, the good kind, helpless and honest. I held his boutonniere while he steadied himself and thought, not many men look beautiful crying. That counted for something. Everything hit its marks. Vows that landed like promises people intend to keep. Champagne that behaved. A playlist that ran without a single awkward skip. If there were cracks, I didn't see them. Maybe that's the trick of a stunning day. You lean into it until you forget how long the night can be. It broke the next evening, inside my parents' house where the air always smells a little like lemon oil and history. We were reliving the safe parts, who fell off rhythm during shout, who whispered too long into a microphone, when Elizabeth stood like a judge rising to deliver. Her hand shook just enough to make it art. Aria stole our honeymoon money, she said. $110,000. It's gone. The room obeyed her silence. I could feel energy hurl itself at me. My own name in her mouth sounded like it belonged to someone else. Stole, I repeated, because if you say a ridiculous word back to the person who threw it, sometimes it shrinks. It didn't. Elizabeth's voice frayed, then gained color. She wept without smearing mascara, detailed a day spent sick with betrayal, described logging into the account and discovering the absence, how empty screens can feel like weaponry. Brian's face stalled, as if some part of him had stepped outside the room until the math added up. My mother, meanwhile, moved at the speed of instinct. How could you? She demanded, disappointment curated to a high gloss. My father's jaw did the thing it did when I got a B in 11th grade chemistry. You are no longer our daughter, he said, as if saying it invented truth. Brian, God bless him, struggled. I don't think Aria would do that, he said. Voice fragile with kindness, he wasn't sure he was allowed to feel. She's been at the front desk all night. I saw her. Stop defending her, Elizabeth snapped, yanking the leash hard. She is lying, and you're choosing her over me, over your wife. She sharpened the pronouns like knives. My mouth tried to work. I said what was obvious. I hadn't touched a cent. I hadn't known where the cash box lived. I had been where everyone could see me because I like hiding in plain sight. None of it mattered. The verdict had already been styled, the sentence delivered. I left to the sound of my own name turning into a cautionary tale behind me. Driving home, I realized this was never about a honeymoon. Our grandmother, our ischemic, sharp-eyed arbiter of thrift and love, had told me quietly 2 months ago that most of her estate would come to me. You notice money, she'd said, the way some people notice weather. She trusted me to steward the family's pieces. Elizabeth found out the way Elizabeth always finds out, without being told. Then Grandma's health took its first long step toward failing, and I became a problem to be solved. If I had been alone, I might have spun for hours. But I wasn't. Mason had fallen asleep on my couch on purpose, the blanket kicked to his knees in a way that made him look 12 and very human. The moment the door clicked, he sat up, reading my face like a book he didn't want to rush. Mason, I said, and the single syllable carried the weight of a house. Tell me, he said. He always says that. Not fix it, not calm down. Tell me. I told him everything. The lemon oil, the courtroom voice, the theft that hadn't happened. He didn't interrupt to promise or advise, just tracked the fault lines with his eyes, and put a hand on my knee when I forgot to breathe. On the coffee table, my phone lit with pings. Family thread, cousins who love drama, someone's aunt's opinion. Mixed into the static, a DM pinged from Kara, Mason's ex. 4 words, surgically petty. Some girls steal attention. I stared at it, then laughed. A single mean little sound that felt better than crying. Mason saw the name. Block her, he said easily. She's a spectator who missed the show. He kissed my temple, then left the phone where it was, face down, not ignored, but unimportant. The thing about being accused of living without morals is that it makes you consider your inventory. I lay awake until the street went empty, and remembered August, when I ducked into the coffee shop 2 towns over to meet a friend and saw my sister in a corner booth with a man who wasn't Brian, hands linked across laminate. A kiss built for privacy, performed in public, laughter that knew the shape of a secret. I'd said nothing, because it wasn't my marriage, because I didn't want to be the reason someone I liked was hurt, because I thought truth has a way of settling accounts without help. Now help was what truth required. I made a plan because plans are the last good magic. Elizabeth's excuses always came in soft Thursdays. Errands, dropping a dress, visiting a friend. After you grow up with someone, you can measure their lies by the hour. Thursday, 7 p.m. felt like an opening in the script. At 6:45 the next evening, I parked my hatchback 2 blocks down from Elizabeth's. She stepped out in flats she only wears when she wants to look unprepared and drove away. I followed the way women follow, far enough to be a rumor, close enough not to lose the plot. She pulled into the same coffee shop lot. The same man stood waiting, backlit by stranger light. They hugged, kissed. I let the camera on my phone be the one witness who doesn't blink. I didn't narrate, didn't gasp, didn't move in my seat. When they went inside, I slid to a spot across the street and framed them in the window. The intimacy wasn't cinematic, no storm, no overturned chairs. It was worse, a hand on a forearm, the lean in, the way 2 people make a third person vanish. 7 minutes felt like the right length, long enough to be undeniable, short enough to be kind. When they left, I recorded the second embrace, the mundane choreography of infidelity. Separate cars, a glance to check the world still loves you. I let Elizabeth's taillights dissolve into traffic before I exhaled. At home, I loaded the footage and scrubbed the audio to remove everything that wasn't the truth. The date stamp sat calm in the corner like a signature. I printed 6 stills: the hug, the kiss, the booth, the closing shot, a goodbye that would make sense to anyone except the person it was meant to wound. My parents raised us on the idea that family dinners salvage anything if you put enough starch on the table, so I texted everyone. I wrote that I wanted to apologize, that I owed Brian an explanation, that I wanted to clear the air. My mother replied in minutes, "We'll be here. You'd better have a damn good reason." Elizabeth chimed in with a smiley that looked like teeth. Brian sent a thumbs-up emoji, which I chose to translate as courage. Mason asked if I wanted him there. Yes, I said. I knew how people rewrite a woman's tone when she's alone. The night arrived in good shoes and bad blood. My mother and father were museum exhibits of disappointment. Elizabeth sat at the head of the table like a painting that cost too much. Brian was beside her, whole weather systems moving across his face every time he tried not to look at me. Mason settled on my left, a quiet anchor. "I'm sorry," I began, and her eyes flared with a joy I didn't intend to feed. "I'm sorry I didn't say this sooner." I slid the laptop onto the table, opened the file, and let the 7 minutes be a kind of sermon. No one spoke. Brian's hand crept to the table edge, white-knuckled. My mother stopped pretending to breathe. My father's mouth went a flat line that taught me math. When the video ended, the quiet didn't save anyone. Brian stood so fast the chair barked. "Who is he?" he asked, a simple violence in his voice. Elizabeth opened her mouth, closed it. "Answer him," I said, "because there is mercy in clarity." "How long?" She tried to find a narrative that would agree to be worn. "It's not what it is," Brian said, and the words were weight. "I worked for this life. The Maldives, the car, the house. You worked for this." He left without drama. Keys, wallet, a breath he wanted to keep. The door didn't slam. I respected him more for that. My parents turned to me with a focus that would have terrified me 2 days ago. "How could you do this to her?" my father asked, the sentence collapsing under irony. "I didn't do anything to her," I said, standing so I wouldn't be the only person seated in a room where truth finally stood up. "I showed you what already was." No one thanked me. I didn't expect them to. I collected the laptop and the stills and what remained of my composure and walked out into a night that didn't need me to explain itself. Back home, Mason poured water like it was sacrament. He didn't say the words people say when they win. He asked if I wanted pasta. I didn't know I was starving until then. And somewhere between midnight and morning, my phone went mercifully still. In the quiet, the plan finished writing itself. I would let the footage do its work while I did mine. Document, refuse, wait. Beginnings, after all, are not just for weddings. Silence has a sound if you listen long enough. In the hours after the dinner, it sat in my apartment like a low machine hum, my phone face down, the city folding into itself outside. I lay on the couch and watched the room learn what to do without noise. Mason dozed in the chair with his socks half off, an accidental sentinel. Every now and then he'd stir and say, "Water?" The same way some people say I'm here. 2 days passed before anyone from my family broke the hush. It wasn't my parents, it was Brian. "Aria?" His voice was careful, a man approaching a door he didn't want to knock too loudly. "I just wanted to say thank you." I sat up. Mason looked over, eyebrows arched. "Good or bad?" I mouthed good and pointed at the phone. Brian exhaled. "I had this ache I couldn't name for months. I kept telling myself it was stress, work, the wedding. Watching that video was—" He paused, searching for a metaphor that wouldn't make him sound dramatic. "It was like someone turned on the kitchen light and all the roaches ran." "I'm sorry," I said. "It wasn't the performance kind. It was the kind you give when a person's life breaks in a way that will save them later." "Are you okay?" "I canceled the Maldives," he said, as if that were a normal sentence to say on a Tuesday. "And the car. I'm moving into a short-term place near the office. She's left me 30 messages I won't listen to. I'm telling you because you were the only person who told me a hard thing without asking me to clap for it." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. "Brian," I said, "you didn't deserve this." He gave a short laugh that wasn't joy. "Well, I didn't deserve the wedding playlist either. It kept looping perfect, like it could make us honest." A pause. "One more thing. If people start edging towards you with pitchforks, send them to me." "People?" I said. I already knew the answer. By mid-afternoon, the family group chat woke, as if it had simply taken a nap. My mother posted a photo of a white lily and a Bible verse about forgiveness so vague it could fit anywhere. My father, in a separate text, sent me 2 sentences that managed to be scolding and paternal at the same time. "You went too far. We settle things in this house quietly." I stared at the messages until the words blurred into shapes. Then I typed, "Truth isn't loud. It only sounds that way when it's been buried." I watched the 3 dots bubble and vanish. No reply. Elizabeth chose a different stage. By evening, a narrative wearing her handwriting began making laps among cousins, friends, from yoga, bridesmaids who love a cause, that I'd stalked her for weeks, that I set her up to ruin a marriage out of jealousy, that my obsession started when Grandma's will came up and turned me into someone else. Screenshots landed in my inbox from people who weren't sure what to believe and wanted to outsource discernment. A few came laced with accusation. "This feels vindictive, Aria." "You couldn't let her be happy?" I filed each message in a folder named Storm and reminded myself that weather passes. Across the room, Mason's phone buzzed with a name I refused to give meaning to. He glanced at it, rolled his eyes, and put the device face down. A minute later, my Instagram pinged. Kara had posted a story so vague it could be worn by anyone. Some people are addicted to breaking what they can't own. A half hour after that, she DM'd me a single star emoji, the petty kind, as if to pin me in a bulletin board of villains. Mason saw. "Block and delete," he said, walking over. "She smells blood that isn't hers. That's her only hobby." He put his palms on the table and leaned down, so I had no choice but to look at him. "We keep our house clean. Let the alley cats yowl." The first apology I didn't expect came from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a year. "I'm sorry I believed her so fast." It was easier than noticing the math. The second came from the barista at the coffee shop where I'd filmed the proof. "I didn't know who you were, but I saw you do it kind." He needed to know. And then Brian did the thing that made the seesaw stop jerking. Without warning, he posted a measured, clean message to his social accounts. No names, no bile. I saw what I needed to see. Aria didn't ruin my relationship. Elizabeth did. Don't at her. If you have a problem, talk to me. It wasn't a clapback. It was a hinge. The air in my messages changed temperature. The performative neutrals went quiet. The spectators drifted off to find a new wreck to narrate. For 24 hours, the sea stilled. Then a courier knocked on my door. "You've been served," he said, as if he were offering a tasting flight. I took the manila envelope and opened it with a butter knife, because ceremony sometimes makes bad things easier to hold. Complaint for defamation. My name in sharp black ink. Their names in plaintiff's font. The words intentional destruction of reputation, underlined, as if ink made them true. Mason read over my shoulder. Well, he said lightly, this is bold. I called a lawyer who understands the difference between fury and strategy. She greeted me with the kind of voice that can keep chaos in a chair. Public place? She asked. Yes, window booth, parking lot, date stamps. You posted it publicly? No, I said. I showed the family in a living room. It went public when she started telling people I stole $110,000. Good, she said. We'll crawl through it with a comb. Truth is a defense. Context is a friend. The waiting between paper and court moves like a bruise, slow at first, then coloring all at once. I filled the hours with small, useful things. I double-checked the metadata on the files. I annotated a timeline that had felt obvious to me, but would need to feel obvious to strangers. I wrote a list of sentences I would not say in a hearing, anything that started with, I can't believe, or ended with, after everything I've done. I practiced looking at a judge without apologizing for inconveniencing the room. The night before our hearing, my mother called. She didn't say hello. Do you really want to do this to her? She asked, as if the court were a venue we'd chosen like a caterer. I didn't file, I said. She did. She's your sister. She's also a person who looked me in the face and broke the part of me that still believed proximity was proof of love. My mother went quiet. Then, your grandmother asked for you this morning. I closed my eyes. Grandma had been shrinking by inches for months, a woman made of sharpness and lace learning how to be small. I'll come tomorrow afternoon, I said, after court. Morning arrived with the kind of light that makes dust look like confetti. The courthouse hummed, a low bureaucratic animal. In the hallway, Mason straightened my collar like that could keep me from saying too much. Truth, he said, as if it were a toast. Only truth. Inside, time became a row of chairs. When our case was called, Elizabeth entered with her chin set to righteous. Her lawyer wore a tie so red it bordered on hostile. My lawyer stood with the easy posture of a person who knows the ground under her feet is solid. We contend, Elizabeth's counsel began, that Ms. Whitlow maliciously recorded and disseminated private footage to destroy my client's social standing and marriage. Recorded in a public cafe, my lawyer said, calm as a winter lake, presented privately to immediate family in response to a prior public accusation of felony theft. Our exhibits include the video metadata, the timestamps, and a statement from Mr. Brian Albright confirming he learned of infidelity solely from this evidence. Brian sat in the back bench like a lighthouse, quiet, visible. When he took the stand, he didn't posture. He simply told the story the way a fact is told. Elizabeth accused Aria of stealing $110,000 without evidence, he said. She tried to turn me against her. The video was how I learned the truth. Aria didn't share it publicly until people started lying about her publicly. He didn't look at Elizabeth. He looked at the judge like her time mattered. When Elizabeth testified, her story came in pieces that refused to touch. He's just a friend, she said at one point. We were on a break, at another. Aria is obsessed with me, as a flourish. The judge's eyebrow did a small, elegant lift that said, choose one. My lawyer slid the stills across the table, then the date, time overlay, then the group texts where Elizabeth had asked for sympathy hours after the friend kissed her in a window booth. We did not show more than was necessary. Mercy can sit beside a boundary without losing heat. In the end, there was no gavel crack that solved my life. There was a dismissal delivered in the even tone of a person who has seen every permutation of denial. Case dismissed, the judge said. There is no defamation in truth. The court notes that the footage was taken in public and initially shared privately. This lawsuit appears to be a misdirection, not a remedy. Ms. Albright, I suggest you consider the choices that brought you here. The room exhaled. Elizabeth's mouth opened as if to hold water and found air. She walked out quickly, heels biting tile, her lawyer collecting papers with the delicate rage of someone who hates losing in daylight. In the hallway, I leaned against the cool wall and let my bones remember their shape. Mason pressed a hand to my back. Lunch? He asked, like we weren't standing in the place where the worst version of my family had just tried to make fiction law. Grandma first, I said, then lunch. He nodded. I'll drive. Outside, the day did not care about our small war. Cars moved. Birds negotiated power lines. Somewhere, a song I couldn't name leaked from a window. I slid my phone into my bag, left it there, and walked toward the kind of beginning that does not need a gown to be real. After the dismissal, the courthouse air clung to me like chalk dust. Mason drove, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near mine, as if to remind me we were still moving forward. We stopped at Grandma's nursing home before lunch, just as I'd promised. Her room smelled faintly of lavender lotion and old paper. She looked smaller than last time, her skin like parchment over bone, but her eyes sharpened when she saw me. "There's my girl," she whispered. I sat beside her, taking her hand gently. For a while we didn't talk, just breathed. Then, softly, she said, "They tried to bury you." I swallowed hard. "You heard?" She gave a faint smile. Families carry stories the way trees carry rings. Some are scars, some are years of abundance. But truth always shows when the wood is cut. Her grip tightened, surprisingly strong. "You stood up. I'm proud." The words cracked something in me I didn't know was brittle. Tears came, uninvited but cleansing. Mason stayed in the doorway, giving us the kind of silence that felt like respect, not avoidance. When we left, I felt both lighter and heavier, like carrying a lantern that burned but also illuminated. Elizabeth's silence didn't last long. A week later, whispers crawled back through the family grapevine. She'd moved into a rented loft in another town, told anyone who would listen that she was starting fresh, painting herself as a phoenix instead of the ash. But the cracks were obvious. Friends unfollowed her online. Invitations dried up. Even a cousin who once worshipped her admitted privately, "She scorched herself. We all see it now." But my parents, oh my parents, clung to denial like it was religion. One evening, my father called. His voice was rougher, stripped of certainty. "Arya, your mother and I, we made mistakes." He paused, as if the words weighed more than he could hold. "We shouldn't have turned on you so quickly." I leaned against the counter, the quiet of my apartment pressing in. "You didn't just turn," I said softly. "You cut me out, without asking, without listening." He sighed. "Elizabeth is still our daughter." "And I'm not?" My voice broke, sharper than I intended. Silence stretched, then, "We just want the family to be whole again." But I had learned something about wholeness. It isn't real if it requires you to bleed out for it. "I'm not rushing to forgive," I said finally. "I need time, and I need you to understand that supporting the truth doesn't mean abandoning her. It means acknowledging she lied." My father didn't argue, for once. He just said, "We'll try." It wasn't enough, but it was something. Brian called again 2 weeks later, his tone more settled. "The paperwork's final," he said. "The house is mine. She's out. I've blocked her number." "Are you okay?" I asked. He chuckled darkly. "I'm better than okay. I feel free. And you gave me that. Thank you again, Arya." I closed my eyes. There was a time when I thought exposing Elizabeth would break me. But it turned out it had saved more than just me. It had freed Brian, too. As for Mason, he never once made me feel like I had to apologize for choosing truth. Even when Kara, his ex, made one last attempt to stir chaos, posting vague comments about girls who think betrayal makes them saints. He laughed and showed me before blocking her. "She's shouting into a cave," he said. "Let her echo." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the villain in someone else's script. I felt like the author of my own. Months later, Grandma passed quietly in her sleep. At the reading of her will, the inheritance was distributed exactly as she'd promised, the majority entrusted to me, with specific notes about using it wisely to protect what matters. My parents didn't argue. They couldn't. Elizabeth didn't even show. Afterward, as I left the lawyer's office, Mason slipped his hand into mine. "Closure?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not closure, continuation, but on my terms now." He smiled, kissed my temple. "Then that's better." And it was, because the war Elizabeth started by trying to bury me under a lie ended not with my destruction, but with her undoing. The truth hadn't just set me free. It had rebuilt me into someone stronger than I'd ever been willing to be before. And this time, the silence in my life didn't feel like exile. It felt like peace.